Hello there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. In some recent videos, I mentioned that my charm packs were getting a little unruly. Today, I'm going to show you how I used up 4 identical charm packs. So these charm packs are really perfect to use for this pattern I'm going to show you, which is just a one-cut star. I've done the same thing with layer cakes before, and I wanted to do it with charm packs. In the layer cake video, I used 1 layer cake and I ended up with 2 baby quilts. But today I wanted to use 4 charm packs all in 1 quilt. The first thing I had to do was determine lights, darks, and shade. So I've got purple, I've got blue, there's green, there's red, there's pink, yellow, orange, so many colors, and all of the colors have lights and darks. Feel free to skip ahead here, but I do think it's nice for you all to see all the different shades that came in these charm packs, because then that might spark some ideas for you. I always try to guess what is going to show up as medium, dark, and light. And I did a pretty good job here figuring out the light, the medium, and the dark. Once I had that figured out, I merged the other 3 charm packs with the first one, keeping those colors, and then I started making pairs. So I would pair a dark with a light, or a medium with a light, or a medium with a dark, just making sure there was contrast. Here is a nice long look for you of the pairs that I came up with and my color combinations. Feel free to pause the screen and take a screenshot, or just kind of maybe jot down what I've got here if this sparks an idea for you. And here is a look at those same pairs in black and white, so you can see that there is that contrast between the pairs that I have put together. Now it was time to set up these pairs to make cutting easier. So what I'm going to be doing is taking a light and a dark and alternating them for the cutting, because then when I get to the sewing machine, I'll be able to chain piece all of this. I am making stacks of 4 here because 4 is a good number that I feel comfortable cutting at one time. To cut my squares, I'm making 1 cut only. I'm cutting over at a 0.2 inches across the 5-inch square, and then 1 inch up from the bottom of my 5-inch square. And if they're not exactly perfect, that's okay. I'm going to do my best to cut them all the same. And since I'm keeping the groups of 4 together, those cuts will all be stitched the same way. So I won't be stitching a group that had one kind of cut with a different group that had a different kind of cut. To get ready to chain piece all these, after I cut the triangle, I take the top triangle off, put it on the bottom, and then add both sets to my chain piecing stack. I got a little bit more efficient towards the end by putting out multiple stacks of 4 at a time. Here is a look at my stack ready to chain piece. I'm ready to go here with a Blade Saver product and an extra bobbin. Now, if we were using templates, we would have a built-in seam allowance, cutting our pieces to the exact size so that when you opened up this seam, it would match perfectly. We're not doing that here. We're going to save some time by just using this one cut method, and when we get to the trimming, I'll show you how I do that. Before we can trim these blocks, we definitely need to press these seams open. So my first pass, I set the seam and then I roll back that little triangle, and we'll take a look at this square, and you can see it is not square because we didn't have the seam allowance built in. You might want to trim every single square on its own. For my purposes, I am making stars, so I'll be mixing these up, but for this demonstration, I just wanted to show you my thought process here. Since I'm making this star, I know that I need those middle T-shapes, those middle 90-degree angles, I need those to match up. So I'm going to sew 2 together and then 2 more together, and then I will put all 4 together, and then last I will trim the 4 patch. So by doing it that way, I'm saving a little bit of time because I don't have to trim up every single square. So there's 42 in a pack and 4 packs. That's a lot of squares to trim up. But if I cut it down and sew 4 blocks together to make a star block, I only have to trim 42 squares. A little bit of a time saver. Okay, it's a lot of a time saver. The other design choice, since I'm using 4 charm packs, I could make all the blocks the same colors if I want to. There is enough to make a block that all matches. All 4 pieces of my block will match, but I'm going to make it scrappy. To get the best effect for my scrappy quilts, I am shuffling these out like a deck of cards. I'm just dealing them out and trying to mix them up as best I can. First, I am shuffling up the squares that have the lighter color on the outside, and the small triangle is the darker color. Once I got that half of the blocks all ready to go and stacked up, I started working on the blocks that had the darker outside and the lighter tiny triangle. I do want all the individual squares mixed up, but for each block I am going to stick with a dark outside or a light outside. And the way I'm putting these blocks together, I'm going to be matching up those inner tiny triangles. You know, they've got those pinked edges, so I can see exactly how they line up, and I'm going to make my straight seam following that line. On this type of block, I really cannot use my 1/4 inch presser foot. It's got that guide, but I would be butting up into this seam that overhangs the 1/4 inch line. So I'm just using my regular presser foot that will go over that bump in the road and get me a nice straight 1/4 inch seam that's lining up with that tiny triangle. Once I had a couple done, I wanted to show you how I am going to join 2 of these sets together. So I could go through and press them all, but I didn't. I just finger pressed the seam where they are going to match up. So that middle seam, I'm going to need to match up for these 2 sets. And I'm going to want to nest that, which means one seam goes one way, one seam goes the other. And nothing else has to match except that pinked edge. I want it to be a nice straight line for the pinked edges, and just that center seam is matching up. I love this block for these particular charm packs. I think the layer cake I used to do the one cut stars was a pale floral, pinks and blues, but I really love it with these bright, bright colors. You can see here the chain piecing, the cutting, everything is so assembly line. You can turn on your favorite podcast, audiobook, or TV show and just enjoy the process of moving the fabric through the machine. Once I went through both stacks, the dark middles and the light middles, I trimmed away excess bulk from each pair, and then I did go ahead and decide I would press each pair open. The main thing I tried to do on all these pairs was make sure that my triangles were going the same way, and I pressed the seam the same way, so that when I put two pairs together, the seams will be going opposite and will nest. So all I'm worried about at this point is nesting that middle seam and making sure those pinked edges are matching each other. To make my chain piecing go a bit faster, I got my clips out and I started clipping those middle seams and top and bottom if I felt that was necessary. I thought this was going to make my chain piecing go a lot faster. Once all my pairs, light and dark, were clipped into place, I took this to the sewing machine and started chain piecing that final seam. I chain pieced the entire stack. When I got to the end of the stack, I did go ahead and get a small cutting mat out and trimmed off the excess that way. It was just a little bit easier, and then it was time to press those seams open. Let us skip ahead here and we will talk about trimming the blocks, which is probably the most important part. I do want to get mostly a centered trim here. My blocks are going to be trimmed to 8 1/4 inches. I'm using the horizontal and vertical lines on my ruler to line up with the horizontal and vertical seams on my block. I'm trying to get those seams as close to the 4 1/8 line as I can. Before I make any cuts, I'm making sure that the 8 1/4 line on the ruler does fit inside the block. I would say about 90% of my blocks did work out where I could line up that 4 1/8 line on my ruler with the seams and fit the 8 1/4 cut inside that. But in the grand scheme of things, the few that I had to tilt the ruler a little bit to get my 8 1/4 block, it's going to be fine, it's going to look great, and you will see that when we get to the quilt reveal. Well, let's fast forward through all this trimming of the blocks. That is really the most complicated part of this quilt. Now we're simply going to be alternating dark and light blocks. So I've got my dark outside stack with the light inner triangles. Got my light outer square with the dark inner triangles, and I'm going to take one from each stack and stitch those together with my 1/4 inch seam. Now I can put my 1/4 inch foot back on my sewing machine. We will have 42 of these blocks, and now that I've got pairs together, we know the layout for 42 is going to be 6 across and 7 down. So I'm going to put 2 pairs together, and then I will be adding that 3rd pair. And I just wanted to show you a couple of examples where the seams don't necessarily match up with the block next to them. That is okay. This is going to be a great quilt. I did decide to stitch together just 1 row at a time when you're dealing with an odd number of pairs. So for a row of 6, I need 3 pairs. When I'm dealing with an odd number like that, I don't like to just keep chain piecing, because then I've done it before where I've gone through the whole stack and I didn't leave any extra for that odd number. So we're just going to go through and do our 7 rows one at a time. I'm just paying attention to going light, dark, light, dark, light, dark on my rows. To put 2 rows together, I'm going to make sure and flip 1 row around the opposite way so that I am still alternating light, dark, light, dark. I'm going to go ahead and go through and clip 2 rows together, then 2 more rows together, and then 2 more rows together, and that'll leave me 1 extra row. I stitched the first 3 pairs of rows together, then I separated those and I clipped 2 rows to 2 more rows, then I clipped 2 rows to the 7th row. Once I got those together, there was just 1 last seam to clip and stitch. Let's take a look at this finished quilt now. This quilt is really working well because of the bright colors and the contrast of the light and the dark blocks. When you look at the quilt with the black and white, you can really see that contrast and why this quilt works so well. I hope this has given you some ideas to work on your stash. Let me know in the comments what you think you might do with this type of pattern. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.